Imagine, just settling into your seat after a nice, relaxing trip to Phuket. You're reading a book, maybe dozing off a bit, and the flight back home to Delhi, it's as smooth as glass. Everything is totally normal. And then, out of nowhere, the plane violently drops, turning a super quiet cabin into a scene of utter chaos. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're dissecting exactly how a totally routine Air India flight turned into a literal mid-air crisis, and we'll unpack the invisible weather phenomenon that actually caused the whole shebang.
Okay, let's dive into this. The initial news reports out of India were pretty stark, right? They instantly grabbed everyone's attention with one specific, chilling phrase: a major disaster was averted. We aren't just talking about a bumpy ride where, your coffee sloshes over the rim. We're talking about a violent structural jolt that put actual lives at risk and pushed an aircraft right to its absolute limits. When news anchors are out there saying a catastrophe was narrowly avoided, well, the stakes were incredibly high. Let's look at exactly how this whole thing played out.
Section 1, a terrifying journey.
To truly wrap our heads around the gravity of this situation, we need to look at the specifics. This was a standard route flown literally countless times from the popular tourist spot of Phuket, Thailand, heading back into the bustling hub of New Delhi. But on this particular day, the sky kind of had a hidden agenda. Let's ground this story in the human element for a second. There were exactly 134 people on board this aircraft. That's 134 passengers and crew members. Families coming back from vacation, business travelers, and flight attendants just walking the aisles. When we talk about aviation incidents, man, it is so easy to just get lost in the technical jargon of the airplane itself. But we've got to remember, these 134 individuals who were just expecting a totally routine touchdown in Delhi, completely unaware of what was waiting for them up there in the skies.
The chronological build-up to this event is honestly what makes it so shocking. According to the reports, the flight was proceeding completely normally. There were absolutely no warning signs. No flashing seatbelt signs turning on hours in advance, no announcements from the captain to brace for rough weather, nothing. It was a perfectly calm flight right up until the final moments before the landing sequence in Delhi, and then, bam, an instantaneous massive jolt struck the aircraft. It was so incredibly sudden that nobody, not the passengers, not the crew, and not even the pilots up front, had even a single second to prepare.
Section 2, what is clear air turbulence? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it starts to explain an entirely invisible threat. Think about it. How does a modern commercial jet packed with all this state-of-the-art radar and weather tracking technology get blindsided without warning? Well, the answer is clear air turbulence. This is essentially a sudden, incredibly strong gust of wind, a severe draft that happens in perfectly clear, cloudless skies. Think of it like hitting a massive, deep pothole on the highway, except the road looks totally flat and, oh yeah, you're traveling hundreds of miles an hour in the sky. Because it happens without any clouds or storms around, it's quite literally an invisible threat. It catches even the absolute most experienced veteran pilots completely off guard, simply because there's nothing to see out the window and absolutely nothing bouncing back on the weather radar.
This brilliantly illustrates the difference, so let's compare the two. With regular turbulence, pilots actually have tools. They can see storm systems forming, right? They see those thick, heavy clouds. Their radar picks up moisture and atmospheric changes, which gives them time to flip on that fasten seatbelt sign and tell the cabin crew to secure the galleys well in advance. But clear air turbulence? There are zero visual cues. Zero. It's just dry, clear air moving at violently different speeds, and because there's no moisture, the radar literally just looks right through it. There's absolutely no warning possible. And that explains exactly why the cabin inside this Air India flight was totally 100% unprepared for the impact.
Section 3. Passengers narrowly escape. When a massive airplane hits a wall of invisible wind, the physics inside the cabin are just brutal. The physical toll of this incident was definitely significant. Due to that total lack of warning we just talked about, passengers and crew members suffered injuries as they were jolted in their seats or literally thrown around the cabin. Actually, the injuries were severe enough that upon finally landing, several individuals required immediate transport and hospitalization. But you know what? Perhaps the most visually shocking detail from the reports is the damage to the aircraft itself. The jolt was so incredibly violent that video from inside the plane showed visible structural cracks right in the cabin ceiling. Just think about the immense sheer force required to actually crack the reinforced ceiling panels of a commercial airliner. It's wild.
So the crucial point is the timing. As terrifying as those cracked ceilings and injuries were, the news reports really emphasized how much worse this whole thing could have been.
This massive jolt happened just before landing. If this exact same invisible wall of wind had struck the aircraft just mere minutes later, like exactly during that super delicate precision sequence of touchdown when the plane is super close to the ground, it could have easily resulted in a completely catastrophic disaster. Thankfully, though, the pilots were able to maintain control. They successfully brought the plane down safely in Delhi, and all 134 passengers and crew were able to evacuate.
Section 4. What happens next?
An incident of this magnitude obviously triggers a strict protocol. Step 1 was the safe evacuation of everyone on board once that plane was securely on the tarmac. Step 2 was triaging and providing immediate medical treatment to those injured, making sure they got to hospitals for proper care. Now we enter Step 3. The Directorate General of Civil Aviation, or DGCA, is launching a full, comprehensive safety investigation. They're going to comb through those flight data recorders, assess the structural integrity of that cracked cabin, and basically investigate if there are any gaps in current procedures that need to be addressed to enhance passenger safety going forward.
Which brings us to a really fascinating final thought. We live in an era of totally unprecedented technological advancement. We've got incredible radar, satellite tracking, highly engineered aircraft, the whole 9 yards. Yet, as this incident so powerfully reminds us, we're still incredibly vulnerable to the invisible forces of nature. So, despite all our modern technology, why are we still at the mercy of invisible winds? It's a question that meteorologists and aviation engineers are literally racing to answer as they try to predict the unpredictable. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep those seatbelts fastened out there.